the website is actually accessible, stratfordupon-avon.co.uk. It's one longer word. So if I just wind back a little bit to say that I was born in Birmingham and went to grammar school in Birmingham and was a police officer in Birmingham. I joined Birmingham City Police, which in 1974 became West Midlands Police. And then in 1986, I had a car accident at work and got injured, and hence the wheelchair. And that's the bit you know of me. That's how you see me after the injuries. I came to live in Stratford because my parents lived at Stow-on-the-Wold at the time. I'd left Stoke Mandeville Hospital, the spinal unit, couldn't go back to my second floor apartment in Solihull, wasn't going to go back to work because in those days they didn't find jobs for you with disabilities in the police. It's slightly different now because of the Equality Act. So I got pensioned off. And I picked Stratford, being in the middle of everywhere, really, and it was nice and flat. I almost went to Worcester because I like watching cricket, but Worcester was on a hill. I decided I didn't fancy a hill because in those days I used to use a manual wheelchair. In fact, I used a manual wheelchair until 1995. But because I've got a broken neck, my arms weren't really coping with the manual wheelchair, so I've changed over to a powered one, which is what you see me using today. So I came to live here in 87. Accident was 86, came here in 87. And the first thing I more or less discovered was if I wanted money from the bank, I had to go to the bank, find somebody to go into the bank, get a staff member to come out, give them my bank card, tell them my PIN number and how much money I wanted. And then they went back in and used the machine because I couldn't get in and couldn't reach the ATM machines, the bank machines outside. In those days, bank machines were quite high. In fact, Midland Bank, HSBC, has still got a really old-fashioned ATM machine in Ely Street. It's one of the older ones. Nowadays, there is a code of practice for bank cash machines for us to get money out, and they're all very reachable. So, discovering I couldn't get money from the bank, I thought, well, this is a bit odd. And then I discovered I couldn't get into this building or that building. And in 1987, there were no shops in Stratford at all with automatic doors. There was none. And to get through doors in a wheelchair isn't very easy. Now, I don't know if any of you in the past have, or pushing push chairs. Some of you might even be using a wheelchair. Push chairs, you know, getting through doors that are not automatic is not very easy. So I then take myself off to the district council offices, which is where I've discovered planning is, and saying, well, why aren't you asking these shops to put in automatic doors? And they're saying, well, we can't really unless they make alterations. But they weren't very, I didn't think they were very proactive. So I kept on pestering them. And the first place in Stratford to have an automatic door was W.H. Smith's in Bridge Street. I can always remember that, the great joy of being able to go into W.H. Smith's. Others followed on slowly. Debenhams, if you remember Debenhams, they had an automatic door in Wood Street. And the only reason they ever had an automatic door was because they were taken to court. Because nationally, they refused to put them into their shops, saying it didn't matter, people could manage. And the phrase, you know, people can manage, I still have that said to me today. People will say, well, you can manage or we can manage. This is about access. And no, we can't. Shouldn't have to manage either. It's 2022, you know, we've moved on a little bit. So Debenhams got taken to court and they were actually fined, I seem to recall it was £500,000. Now I'm talking of 20 odd years ago. And then in those days, it was a lot of money, but they went round and they put automatic doors into all their shops. So at the same time, I then started looking at, because I've got a bit of a legal background because of the work I'd done in the police and I was interested, I started looking at planning applications and started talking to the planners at the council. Well, when they're doing these alterations to this shop, why can't we do this or why don't they do that? And I quickly discovered that the planning case officers, the best one in the world, they've got an interest, but they don't have a lot of training in accessibility. So I started, there was a planner called Les Greenwood. I don't know if any of you remember Les, some of you might. He went off, he works from, well, he's working at Witch Haven now. He worked for himself, but he's doing a bit of work with Witch Haven now. But he encouraged me to say to them, well, tell us what to do. And I said, well, not sure that I really know what to do, but I'll tell you what I've learned with my experience as a wheelchair user. Then and it's really, I can't say how I ever ended up being Accessible Stratford. Well, I can tell you how I became Accessible Stratford. I started going to meetings and I was being introduced as Elizabeth Dixon, the blue badge user. And I just thought, well, that's a bit silly, or I don't quite like that. So I just called myself Accessible Stratford, and that was how the name evolved, really. I've had no real training in access work, but I've done a lot of work, and I've worked with tourism boards. I've worked with Visit Scotland, Visit England, and I did something alongside Visit England last week at the Shakespeare's England Forum. Their business manager, he spoke about the national regulations on access and how within tourism adjustments could be made. And then I gave a short talk on some of the practical things some of the local businesses could do to make improvements. Not relevant to perhaps Accessible Stratford, but one of the suggestions I would say to them is, have you got a large print menu that your customers can read, instead of the one that's got the little silly writing, you know, that's a bit harder to read? Just simple suggestions. So over the years, I did some work with the RSC. I was a member of the RSC Access Group for many, many years. And that led through, right the way through the rebuilding work, during which time I was also, I was a governor for a number of years at the same time. So I was involved with the rebuilding of the main theatre, and we had a really great access group that they actually closed down as it was rebuilt, as the rebuild was done. And at the same time, the theatre, their access manager left and she wasn't replaced. Access managers there used to be an access manager at the district council, and she then went part-time when she had a baby. And then when she left, she was never replaced. And generally, from what I understand nationally, there are not access officers with district councils or councils as such. Not even the county council, not even Warwickshire's got an access officer. So there is no one person looking after accessibility. And accessibility for me is physical disabilities. Now then, a lot of you see me in a wheelchair. But I am the absolute minority of people with disabilities. About 17% of the population has got a physical disability. So that's your hearing, sight. Sight starts when we wear glasses and might end up blind with a guide dog. Hearing is just a loss of hearing. You might end up with hearing aids, totally deaf. And people with mobility impairments. So a mix of walking aids going through to paralysis, which is me, and being a wheelchair user. So over the years, I've done courses, but not so. I've done courses to understand them, but I'm not a professional. So I've got lots and lots of experience. If I don't know something, I will go and find out, because that's what I would do. Now, I mentioned 17% of the population with a physical disability, but we now have to remember that we've got people with a lot of mental health problems, learning difficulties and dementia. And we now know that the figures are 1 in 4 of the population. It's actually 24% of the population has got a disability of some sort. That's a huge number. And my concern is that still there's not being enough done to recognise the needs of everybody. We've got premises in town here. I'm talking mainly about Stratford. I know we're Stratford Society. We've got premises that have got an accessible toilet that I can't get my wheelchair in because it's not to the right size or design. But there's the only way that they can be criticised would be for me to make a formal complaint about them. and take them through the county court, because this is civil law, it's not criminal law. So there's one particular place where lots of us like to go for cups of tea and coffee, including me, and I do go, but I can't use the toilet because I can't get the wheelchair in. And it just seems so wrong that the improvement can't be made. I've had a conversation with the manager regularly. They've also got tables inside their premises that have got a front edge on. Now, when you're a wheelchair user, you want to be able to get, like anybody eating at a table, you want to be able to get near a table. But if it's got the front piece on at the front, which you can't get the wheelchair underneath, so I can't get near their tables. So I actually tend to sit outside in their little backyard. And you can probably work out where I'm talking about by now. So I don't ever eat there because I can't use their tables. So I've done lots of different work. I've begged and pestered the council for another changing places toilet in Stratford. We do have one. A changing places toilet is larger than an accessible toilet. It has a hoist for people that actually need hoisting to be moved from their wheelchair to use the toilet. But they are now having to provided within planning law at larger developments. So, for instance, if we had a major hotel built again from new only, but not a rebuild, one would have to be provided. Or if we had like a convention centre built or something like that. So we do have a changing places toilet in Stratford. It's down at the leisure centre, and I managed to get some funding from the county council about 7 years ago now to build it. It was when the refurb was done. But at the moment, unfortunately, the leisure centre people are using it as the accessible disabled changing room. And it's not meant to be a changing room, it's because it's got lots of space. It's meant to be a toilet. Now, we get visitors coming to our town who will need to use a toilet. Lots of people, the accessible toilets, I don't know if anybody uses them. You have a radar key, so you've got an extra key to get in. There's lots of space because you just need a bit of space. You might have a carer with you. So the district council are very good. They provide accessible toilets in all their car parks. That's really good. But I'm pushing for another changing places toilet. Bell Court have said that there is a unit there, and this has been agreed via the town council at a meeting that we all went to. I went with the Bell Court managers, one of the directors, and there is a unit there that can be used for the changing places toilet, but they won't fit it out. So I just need £20,000 to fit it out. So I'm just hoping, I understand at some point this year, the government will drop some extra money funding in. So as soon as they do, I will tell the district council and ask them to apply, because the application has to come through a local authority unless you're going to self-fund. And as much as I can do to help people, I can't find £20,000, I'm afraid. Baby change facilities, I'm really keen that we see those in lots of places. But they should not be inside an accessible toilet. They should be separate. And they need their own little bit of space. I'm always quite amused when I look at a website for somewhere and I'll see that dogs are very welcome. And then I look to see, well, are wheelchairs welcome? Or have we got that large print menu that I was talking about earlier? And I just think, you know, if you're going to mention dogs are welcome, could you just say that wheelchair users are welcome? Just a simple wheelchair symbol on the website to give an indication. One of the things I also do is I lead the Friends of Stratford Shop Mobility. And I don't know if any of you are aware that the district council, Shop Mobility is inside the Bridgefoot car park, which is opposite the Crown Plaza. The district council provide the unit. It's in the car park. They've got 2 part-time staff, which are almost the equivalent of one full-time member. And then all the equipment that is outside that can be loaned, which is mobility scooters and wheelchairs. There's about £80,000 worth in there. A real mix of equipment, ramps and walking aids, all sorts of things to borrow. They belong to the Friends of Shop Mobility, and I'm the lead person for that. We set ourselves up as a charity a number of years ago, but the district council want to pull the funding on shop mobility next year, and it was discussed at council meeting again today. That they want to stop the funding, and they're saying that it can be run independently or run as a charity. Well, I believe that the council should. I firmly believe the council should run shop mobility. It's an asset to the town. It shows that everybody's welcome, whether you're living here and have the need. And in case anybody doesn't know what shop mobility is, you can go along and you can borrow a wheelchair or a mobility scooter. You can borrow it for the day, free of charge, but give us a donation, please. You can borrow it for the week. If you come on holiday, let us know in advance and we'll take it to your hotel or your guest house. You might have a need for a short-term loan. You might come out of hospital and you just need one for a short time. Come and borrow one. So there's quite a good income from it. It doesn't cost an awful lot of money to run for the council. But what they're saying is that at Leamington, the Leamington Shop Mobility, they receive a grant from Warwick District Council, and then they do run theirs independently. But the grant they receive is in excess of what they pay the staff, Stratford pay their staff. And I'm saying, please, will you just run it? Because I think it's an asset to the town. I would hate to think that tourists or anybody, tourists particularly, because we're trying to welcome everybody to our town. We're trying to say we are an inclusive town. I would hate to think they came to Stratford and somebody said, but you haven't got a shop mobility. So actually, I didn't come. So for the next few months, I'm going to have to do a lot of work in trying to talk to councillors to see if I can persuade them, because they're funding it for the whole of this financial year. And that starts on the 1st of April, and then the funding stops. They've told me, promised me, and I've got the emails that they will include me in future discussions. So I keep pestering them, so just in case they forget me. But it's something I feel very, very strongly about. I tend to look at planning applications most weeks, which sounds a bit sad, really, just to see if there's anything happening. If there's a guest house being built or being redeveloped and they're going to change the bedrooms round, then I'll contact them. Haven't got much shame, as you can see, and say, have you thought of making one of your bedrooms suitable for wheelchair users? Or could you, if their building might not be accessible, they've got steps at the front entrance, for instance, but somebody could get in. What have you done to make your building suitable for somebody who just might have a mobility impairment? Can you have a wet room instead of a bathroom? What have you done to think about other users? So I look at planning applications. It doesn't take me very long to skim down, because a lot of them are cutting down trees, and a lot of them are people living in their own homes, want to build. But it's the retail, and it's not the residential stuff I look at. We've got one of the things that I'm really pleased about is the district council again. See, for all the good they do so much good, and they still want to shop mobility. Such a shame, isn't it? But they've got hoists in all the leisure centres, at the swimming pool, at the side of the swimming pool. So anybody who needs to be hoisted in and out of the swimming pool, that includes me. I take my wheelchair to the edge, you transfer over to the pool hoist seat, and you lower it into the water. It's not as nice as jumping in, but I can't remember jumping in. And then you come back out the same way. But it means that everybody can get in and out of the pool. And all the leisure centres across the district have got that facility. So that's something that's really good. And they're really good at providing. I've been doing some work with the District Council Dementia Stakeholder Unit. So they've got a group of people together who are overseeing dementia, the dementia cafes. The leisure centre have got an active unit where they encourage people. They might want to go and have a quiet time in the pool, so they're allocating quiet hours. You might have seen that Tesco and Morrison's are having a quiet hour for shopping for people that just want a bit of quiet. Unfortunately, I don't know what you think, but they're picking 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, a lot of people are not quite out of bed at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm out of bed, but I'm certainly not shopping. So they're doing the right thing, but it's just the timing. But of course, to have a quiet hour when they want, it's costing them money. So it's a bit of a compromise, isn't it? One of the things I've learned through working with the dementia group is that, and that this is something that you might notice walking around, black doormats at the entrance, black doormats at entrances to premises. Somebody with dementia, when they see a black doormat, they actually think they're falling into a hole. So what is being suggested is with the black doormats, you have a coloured edging or you get a logo put onto them. So that will solve that situation. So when I see them, I'll go and talk to the business owner and explain, did you know, can you? But there is a firm that goes around replacing doormats, which actually I've forgotten the name, sorry. The leisure centre contractors are talking to them at the moment saying, we want you to give us coloured doormats. We don't want your black ones anymore because. So that's an interesting conversation because they've got quite a big contract with them. So I told you that I've done some work over the years with the RSC. I was involved with the rebuild of the costume workshop. They came and talked to me about the entrance and the lift at the entrance, just asking for my advice. I must admit, I couldn't believe how much money they were going to spend on that little costume workshop. And when they've rebuilt it, I can completely understand. I know it's going to be open for tours fairly soon. And I would urge you all to go and have a look if you haven't seen. It's an amazing unit inside. Absolutely brilliant. And for somebody who went and saw just the first half of Much Ado last week, the costumes were brilliant. That's my only comment I would make about it. So I worked with the RSC at the other place when they did the rebuild up there. One of the things that I like to ensure that should automatically happen and doesn't, should be a hearing loop fitted on the reception desks. It actually should be built in. It only has to be a piece of wiring. So when you're doing your wiring on a rebuild, you build it in. If you don't build one in, then you have a stand-up one on the desk that about A4 size with a symbol of an ear on. But that means somebody who has hearing aids, they talk towards the hearing loop system and it microphones it off, it bounces the sound for them, which means that they're able to hear. Something I've not had much success with, I've been trying to get businesses to consider if they would train any of their staff to do sign language. Again, it's only a small number of population might need to do signing. But it's you can do courses quite reasonable cost up at the college. And again, if the people are in a big business, it could be an asset to them if they've got a member of staff who could do signing. I do a little bit of work with the Citizens Advice. I've been helping them with some blue badge applications. And then going sideways from that, I've done some work with Welcome Here, which has been with the refugees. And I've done some of the benefit applications. I've helped with the benefit applications. I tend to describe myself as a bit like treacle thinly spread, because whatever I do doesn't take up too much of my time. It just takes up a bit of my time at the time I'm doing it, which is how I manage. I like to encourage people, if they've got a business or premises that can have a ramp at the front entrance to help get inside who might be a wheelchair user, can you do that? And a lot of places do it. There's one or two shops in town have never done, and one in particular never will, because they use the expression, we can manage. And I've never been in there in the 30 years I've lived here. And it's somewhere in Chapel Street where I would spend quite a lot of money if I could get in and out of there. So I've been helping write accessibility statements for some of the markets and the festivals. I did take the post office to court once. That was quite interesting. And the day before we were going to court, they agreed that they would put back in place a lower counter that they'd removed. They had a nice lower counter so that not everybody's at 2 metre height. I guess Lindsay might be about 2 metre height. I'm thinking, I don't know, nearer to 2 meters, certainly than me, sat down. So you have a lower counter, and not, you know, some people are shorter. So it's written in your lower counter. They did a rebuild at the post office about 10 years ago, and they didn't put it back. And I got along, yes, you need to. No, we don't. Yes, you do. No, we. So I actually paid £50 to the county court. I wouldn't be so brave now, and which meant that they had some papers served on them to put it in, and they kept saying no, they wouldn't. Now, had it gone to court and had I lost, I'd have had to pay their expenses, and I was really getting worried. And then the day before, they'd given it a court hearing, and then they paid up, and within a fortnight, they'd put in a lower counter, and they gave me £500 damages, which I gave to the hospice. So I was quite proud of that. I think the Herald covered it at the time. In fact, I know they did. So I was really proud about that. But I must say, I don't think I would be brave enough to go to court with anybody again, because I just wouldn't be. I still do some work with West Midlands Police. At the moment, they're converting Steelhouse Lane lockup into a museum. And I've been doing some work on that today for them. They've put a lift in to the lockup, which will be from one of the side roads. And today I've written an accessibility statement, which will go onto their website. So if you're visiting there with any type of disability, you can see what facilities they've got, because it's actually quite small inside. But so I'm doing some work with them. I've just been asked if I could do a little bit of work with the Benevolent Fund, the West Midlands Police Benevolent Fund, who I have to say have supported me so well since I was injured. I know I was injured at work, but they've been great at looking after me, welfare-wise, health-wise. They've bought my wheelchairs for me over the years, and they used to pay for the adaptations to my cars when I was driving, mainly because I was injured on duty. It was just part of what was done for me. But they've just bought a new property for a holiday home, the Benevolent Fund has. We're going to do a conversion on it to turn it into accessible for all users. Sideways from that, I sit on the Equality and Diversity Inclusion panel for SWIFT, which is our hospital trust, doing access advice. And I do the same for the Clinical Commissioning Group. As I said, not very much, just little bits. I'm on the Stakeholder Equality Group for West Midlands Trains. We meet later this week. I'm hoping to help adaptive rowing down at the rowing club. We're trying to get a hoist put in to get people off the wheelchairs onto the water, because at the moment they're being picked up manually and moved onto the boats, which isn't very nice. I wouldn't let anybody lift me up. Not very safe either, because the pontoons are moving about. So we're going to see if we can do some fundraising and get a hoist built. Look for some grants to do that. And then there's been lots of places around town over the years. I wrote down a few that I'd helped, which I think I might end with then, Lindsay. Just some of the ones I've helped are, I was involved when they put the lift in at the town hall. I did work with the Crown Plaza when they did some changes, the Butterfly Farm. I'm helping I am helping with the changes that are going to be ongoing at the sports club. Holy Trinity Church, I've done one or two things over the years. I go to the church, but we've made changes. We've got hearing loops in, and we had the new side entrance in that was level. Did a little bit of work with CARES. I produced an access guide, and I think Lindsay put a photograph of it onto the website, and she'd tell you that the boys from CARES were the first ones to gather all the information for me to produce the very first guide. I'm on version 5 now. And just the very first time I went and saw the headmaster of the day, and they went round the shops and stores in Stratford for me, collecting information so that we could do the first one. I've been involved with the plaques in the pavements. I think the Stratford Society have perhaps paid for one. The main idea that I'm involved is nothing to do with the drawings or the design, is to make sure they're not put in front of a dropped curb. Because if you get a group of people standing around looking at them, it then blocks the drop curb, which makes it unusable. And I have worked, as I said, I'd worked for Visit England, Visit Scotland. I've also worked nationally for Premier Inns. Should tell you that the Town Trust have always sponsored my guides, for which I'm forever grateful. That's been really good. And that's just about, I think that's just about me done, Lindsay.